Okay, well, I'm David.
Wait, Robbie, are you recording?
I think.
Yeah, I'm recording.
Sorry. Okay.
Do I go? Do you guys want to introduce yourselves too, or just introduce yourselves when we talk?
I guess.
Everyone, just introduce yourselves right now.
Okay.
All right, I'll go. My name is Ahmad Abdelrahman. I'm a senior studying international relations.
I'm Nekiya Davis. I'm a senior studying criminal justice.
My name is Grace Hocking. I'm a freshman studying communications.
My name is Robbie Farrell. I am a senior also studying communications.
And I'm David, and I'm a sophomore studying marketing business. So our topic that our group is discussing is privacy involving social media and the I guess the increased realm of personal data collection that social media platforms are now introducing, or that are now using. But the main arguments and the points of discussion will revolve around just privacy in general with social media. And then we'll also talk about how these breaches of privacy and just overall increased control of social media platforms that they have on their platform, that it kind of leads to things such as war propaganda and just overall a lot of negative effects that can cause it. So Facebook was kind of one of the first companies to really introduce, like I said, this realm of personal data collection. It was kind of something that was new to technology at the time, especially the rise of social media platforms, as Facebook was one of the bigger platforms to arise around 2012, I think. And in this class, we watched a good documentary. I don't remember what week it was, but it was right before Like War, around the same time we started Like War. It was called The Facebook Dilemma. I don't know if you guys remember that.
I remember.
Yeah. I thought I learned a lot from there, and it actually kind of opened my eyes to how much our privacy is kind of invaded, especially nowadays too, because it's even increased from the time Facebook started using it. And so basically what went down was around the time that they started up, they saw a great increase in users, obviously, but eventually it flattened out. So they were trying to figure out ways of how they can get people to use the app more. So they basically started collecting more personal information, and they even announced a relationship with the data broker company that obviously held mass amounts of data on people and the users on the app. So the data tracked things such as like where they live, where they work, traffic routes, a whole bunch of personal information. And its goal was obviously to use like personalized advertisements and just overall create a personalized experience for the user so that they spend more time on it. And so this was going down, and people were somewhat suspicious of it at the time, but still they weren't that educated on it until the Federal Trade Commission eventually kind of stepped in and found that they'd been sharing users' personal data with third-party developers, such as ones that create apps on the platform and stuff like that. And this was very concerning because Facebook didn't make it clear to their consumers or to their users to the extent of where their personal data was being shared. And it allowed these third parties, it allowed for hackers and just the information to kind of be out there with these third parties. So there's obviously the danger that the data would be misused or wrongfully assessed because there's no real protection or control of what's being done with the data. So I actually looked it up, and around 2009, the FTC did impose a $5 billion penalty and forced more transparent and altered guidelines for Facebook to make it more transparent of like what they're doing and the data and their data that they're collecting. So I guess that's one good point so far in the discussion, is that people are taking notice to the extent of where our personal information is being used by these platforms. It's not like they're just running free with it and no one knows about it, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that they're still doing these mass amounts of collection of personal data. What was I gonna say? Yeah, so it doesn't really take away from the fact that we're still seeing this today. We're seeing this today with targeted ads or contact tracing of like, you know, your friends have that, or they know your friends or who you're closest with. Like I'll be on Instagram or something and I won't even have their phone. Sometimes I won't even have their phone number in my contact or anything. And they'll just know like who I'm generally around, or if I'm saying, oh, I'm hungry for tacos or something, I'll Google something. Obviously, you guys have probably all done it. You go on Instagram, you get an ad for Taco Bell or something or whatever. So obviously we still see this today. I'll go for a couple more minutes because I don't want to talk too long. Maybe like a minute or two. So yeah, so they kind of provided this blueprint, Facebook did, with these targeted ads, personalized feeds, just overall increased access to personal information for platforms such as Twitter and TikTok to kind of do the same thing, to create algorithms to make you stay on the app longer. And just in general, this kind of leads to too much control and power, I believe, with the companies. And you guys all have your own voice on this as well, but this is my opinion. I think it kind of does lead to too much control and power with the companies, and it makes people subject to manipulation, which we'll dive into. The opportunities for disinformation, deception, and manipulation, I feel like, are just really big with how much access that they have to their users. And when it comes to just the overall power that they have as well, these big platforms serve as gatekeepers to information because they're able to control what and limit what we see on the platform. So this is obviously a concept that we covered a lot during the class and that we'll cover a lot in this conversation. We learned this in A View from Somewhere and Like War, but the fact that the platforms can have protection under the Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act, they're protected under this that states no website can be held accountable for speech of its users. So it basically gives immunity to them and still gives them power to control what people see, and it can, you know, make sub communities, hate communities on the internet. Because if you're a Trump supporter, or you're, you know, a part of a movement or whatever, and you're liking and sharing certain things, it's going to personalize your feed to where that's the only thing you're going to see. And that just makes it subject to a lot of negative effects that could cause, or a lot of negative things that could go on the internet. And I guess my last point is this is all clearly kind of designed to make users spend more time on the platforms, but it also just sort of makes the users serve as sort of puppets to the companies. Causes a lot of clear issues to arise, such as security breaches, account hacking, impersonation, stalking, harassment, scamming, and just overall, like we said, with gatekeeping, it can cause marginalized voices to be unheard, because the social media companies still hold the great amount of power when it comes to deciding what they want to show or hide. So there's definitely ways that we can control this, and we can talk about that later. But that's about it for how I guess the origin of how the company Facebook kind of set the stage for, or set the blueprint for a lot of ads, or a lot of apps to kind of follow in their footsteps.
But going off of what you were talking about Facebook, in Like Where they did talk a lot about how Facebook like takes data. On page 178, they talked about how patterns of Facebook likes could be used to predict characteristics of someone's life, from their sexual orientation to whether their parents are divorced. And it's stuff like that, where it's not necessarily a breach of privacy to like go through the likes, you agree to the terms and conditions, but it's just kind of that unexpected way that social media can like basically predict your every move, where the breaching of privacy gets to be too much and it's kind of creepy. But we saw that a lot in Like War, and I just thought that was interesting. And it relates to what you were just mentioning.
Mhm.
So obviously we learned privacy on Facebook is non-existent. And we've learned that through the books. And obviously, so I read this article that basically said Facebook in March 2018, after it was revealed that personal data was illegally harvested from an online personality quiz and sold to Cambridge Analytica, a data firm. So basically, Facebook sold the privacy information to Cambridge Analytica. As a result, the US government fined them $5 billion. So basically, what I'm trying to come to is, what do you guys think? Do you guys think that that's enough? That's sufficient? $5 billion, you know, like Mark Zuckerberg is a pretty rich person, you know, and do you think $5 billion is sufficient to implement change and allowing more privacy for Facebook users?
Well, I think, I don't know, it's tough to quantify like privacy in terms of like a number, like a dollar amount. But I think this kind of relates to one of the articles I looked at, talks about social media privacy concerns as it relates to the trusting beliefs and risk beliefs of users. So basically, like trusting belief is the amount of trust that they have, like any user has in like a social media site to kind of keep their information private. And the risk belief is like the actual potential for loss of information. So and it was kind of interesting, like they found that the risk beliefs are like negatively associated with the positively associated with like privacy concerns on almost all social media platforms. So basically people know what the risk of like their privacy getting exposed and their information getting leaked and stuff like that, but the trusting beliefs were much more negatively associated with the privacy concerns. So basically like people are willing to trust like that their information is out there and they're willing to put their information out there and kind of share it on social media, even though they're aware of the ability for kind of their information to get leaked. So I kind of thought that was interesting because like just in the grand scheme of the amount of social media like leaks that there have been and stuff like that, and still people are willing to have their information put out there. Just, it was actually kind of related to another article I looked at that talks about the privacy paradox, which is basically that it kind of is pretty similar. It's basically the like paradoxical view that people have about social media. Like they think everything is compromising their privacy on all social media platforms, but they're still willing to expose themselves. And it's kind of like the way they talked about it in the article was it's like a cost benefit relationship, where the cost is like your identity and like information about yourself, and the benefit is social capital. So basically the amount of like information and data that you're willing to expose and make public about yourself for a certain amount of social capital. And I think that's kind of what Facebook capitalized on, like that combined with the fact that people didn't know how much data they were exposing and how much Facebook was tracking them. And I think that's kind of like one of the biggest dangers, and it's always growing because there are always new ways for information to be tracked and things like that. So I think that's kind of the overarching theme of the discussion for sure.
Yeah, just to go off what you said, I looked up the most two common ways that information was getting like leaked or sold to third parties was through data mining and also phishing. So data mining was just like when you sign up for a Facebook profile or any social media platform, you have to enter like your name, your birthday, maybe the hometown you stay in, or maybe where you work at. And what this information with Facebook or other social media platforms do is they sell it to third-party companies, so that way they can run ads that's like they think that you will most likely interact with, and these ads are paid for by those same companies. So in actuality, we're signing up for these we're signing up for these social media accounts, and basically the more people sign up, the more money that platform gets, ideally. So the more information they can get out of you, the more money, is basically how it's looked at. So that's a little bit about data mining itself. And also with phishing is where you have like the hackers hack into your account and take over your account, or like change your password, something like that. It was a incident that happened, I believe this was in 2016, where like over $100,000 affiliated influencer accounts were hacked into, and there was a ransom with it to get your account back. And a lot of influencers had either start over with a new account, or they had to pay them ransom to get their account back. And it makes it easy for hackers to do this, because like now a lot of apps are asking like for locations. Like instead you upload a picture, they ask, well, hey, were you here? And sometimes you don't know that in your settings, once you agree to the terms and conditions of these social media platforms, it's embedded in their terms that you'll be sharing your location with the app. So like I said, it's not so much they're tracking you, but they want to see like what do you do on a daily basis, or who do you interact with. So that's a way of them tracking you as well. And then I looked up too, off of an article of Forbes, it said like how much does Americans use social media platforms in contrast to other countries, and it found that about 61%, which is 1 in 10 Americans, use social media every day. And they post either every day, or that's how they interact with like their family and friends and things like that, because it's more easier to go to an app and interact with multiple people at one time than it is the individual they call or text. They found that social media has kind of benefited them in a way of staying connected, but also their privacy is being invaded as well too. So that was something that I've learned. Those two methods were kind of interesting to me that I found out.
Mm-hmm. I also found a lot of stuff about just kind of how people's information is like mined, and data. I saw something about data scraping. But kind of to go back on Robbie's point, I found like a research from a professor at Charles Sturt University in Australia, but it was basically about how much Saudi Arabian women like trust the internet and like trust their social media network, especially because of the amount of blackmailing that goes on. So they found that 57% of all blackmail crimes in Saudi Arabia were facilitated using information communication technology, and that 22% were initiated from a social network site. But despite all of this blackmailing that is going on, that's coming from social networking sites and coming from like places where they give their information, that a majority of the women like in this study know their privacy, like know the privacy that they have on social media, and they still trust it, and they're aware of the risks, even though, and they're actively taking this risk, even though there's such a high cost possibly. And obviously not all privacy breaches are blackmailing, but with the like social media influencers and how they had ransoms, that's blackmailing. But they still signed the terms and conditions, and they signed all this stuff, and they like are kind of like stuck with how much privacy do they actually have on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, kind of how that's related to the location thing too, because it's all about like information that you share, like kind of with or without knowledge almost of how much information you're actually sharing. And then just because of like, for whatever reason, you're willing to share your information for social capital, or for whatever, for when you're making a Facebook account, and then like all the location tracking and data that comes out of it ends up being like so much more information than anyone thinks that they're sharing.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it stems too from like, I guess you could say miseducation, but when it comes to reading terms when it comes to reading like what do you call it, the terms of services or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I forgot what the
Terms and conditions.
Terms and conditions, thank you. When it comes to reading that, not a lot of people, like I'll fully admit it, I'm not sitting there reading the whole entire thing. I might skim it. And I think that's kind of the case for a lot of people. But like, I don't know if you guys have seen like your grandparents interact with anything on the internet, or like at least my grandparents on social media and just stuff in general. Like they're literally walking targets for scams and just overall manipulation. And I think a lot of it comes to, like we said, okay, Facebook did get banned 5 billion, but there was no real physical change implemented after that, because they're still kind of doing the same thing. All they did was they were more transparent with their actions, so they made it, I guess, more transparent in including it in their conditions and their guidelines and everything. So I guess I can ask, or we can discuss, is there a way that they could make it more obvious to where people are more aware of what data they're giving up to these platforms? Because the only real way to, because I'll admit it, I was aware kind of through TikTok of like, okay, I know, or just through editing or targeted ads that there was some fishy stuff going down. But I guess, yeah, like, do you guys think there's a way that they could be even more transparent and educating people like, okay, we're doing this, and will that, I guess, make it better or anything?
I think Facebook did it on purpose, so when they got the 5 billion fine, it wasn't because they were just selling personal information such as their name or where they're from. No, it was basically selling polls to where over 200,000 people took a poll, and Facebook, without informing the participants, sold the information of the polls to other companies. So no one really knew that their information is going to be sold. However, Facebook did it anyways. I feel like if Facebook isn't trying to be open with their privacy. They're trying to hide it. They're trying to sell information without people noticing. But it took them over 10 years to finally get caught and get fined only 5 billion. So I don't think that's sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like all social media platforms are like that too. I mean, like you said, David, like older people are walking targets, but I mean, like platforms that younger people are using are still not gonna like willingly disclose how they go about like collecting information and keeping that information private from their users, and like what information like their users are allowing them to collect just based on the terms and conditions that like 90% of their users don't even read. So I think it's really tough unless you do like go word by word through the terms and conditions to have like a better like protocol for social media networks to share that information, because it's just like so detrimental for them. I mean, if that's what happened to Facebook, there's definitely information tracking that's going on Twitter. I mean, even stuff that you put out publicly, like tweets, can be connected and tracked like that so easily. And that's not even something that you can like control at all. Like once you put out a tweet, it's public, whatever. So it's not even like an issue of the terms and conditions. And then when you go deeper into it and actually like look at the terms and conditions, there's so much more information that's tracked and connected back to you. So I just think it's a really tough issue to kind of go forward with.
Yeah, so going off of kind of what you just said, Robbie, and also the article I was reading also stated that when people sign up for like these social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, or whatever, there are already settings that are already set before we even create the profile. So once we create our profile, we're going off of what the social media platforms are already set for us. And a lot of us don't even go and check our advanced settings to change these settings, or we don't even know that they exist altogether, because like I said, these social media platforms are being kind of like deviant and not sharing that information that, hey, you can go in and change the setting, or you can go in and do this, or you can limit the information that we collect from you. I know in the European Union, they just passed last year, I believe, it's a general data protection law, and it basically controls what information is being collected by these social media platforms, whether it's like your name, your date of birth, where you live, and then also to information on, like, say, like the ads, how David talked about earlier. Because it's funny, because me and my friend, we'd be like, I want like Chick-fil-A or something like that, or I want these pair of shoes, and like the next day or later on that night, we see an ad for the exact same thing we were talking about, and we didn't even search it online. So too, there's probably stuff where they can pick up what we say through our microphones and things like that, and we don't even know about it. So I feel like more harsher laws need to be put in place, especially in the US when it comes to these social apps like TikTok too, because it was a big thing how Trump, before he left office, wanted to get TikTok banned because of the privacy setup that was going on with uploading these videos to social media as well. So I thought that was interesting to know too.
Yeah, and I definitely think that like connects directly back to the whole trusting beliefs, risk beliefs thing that I was talking about, because like for example, when like you just said, when you go on social media or Instagram, like when you go to post a story, it's like, do you give Instagram access to your camera? Like, do you give Instagram access to your microphone? And you hit allow, and it's like, that's it. Like, that's the trusting belief right there. Like, people trust it enough to say allow, but then like Instagram just has access to your microphone, and people don't really consider that. Like, after you use the microphone to post the story or whatever, like Instagram then just has access to your microphone, and like, I don't know, they can track your speech and kind of target ads based on that. Because I feel like personally for me, like Instagram is the worst with that. Like, I'll say something and then pull up Instagram and it's like immediately, like within an hour, it's like I got a targeted ad for something. It's like sponsored right on my feed. It's crazy. So, and like, even if like, I don't know, that's just,
No, it is scary.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
crazy.
Definitely
Yeah.
scary.
And I also feel too that it might like ask for your permission, but in hindsight, it's not really a permission type thing. It's more so thing that you have to do if you want to use these apps. So
Yeah.
if you don't allow them to use your pictures or access your microphone, then you won't be able to post and interact with your friends and stuff. So it's kind of like a forced hand that you have to allow them to do in order to use their app, which I think like more laws and rules to be in place. So that way it's given an option to the users, not just they're forced into doing it.
That's a good point. Yeah, like a more, I guess, more in depth when it comes to what access they have. So like you said, if you give them access to your camera or your photos or whatever, like it should only be, you should have the option of, okay, I want to be able to upload photos where it could, when I go on the app, it can access my photos, but I don't want it tracking like faces and my photos and having access to all my photo albums and stuff like that. So I think that's actually a very good point when it comes to, it kind of does serve as a little mouse trap of where they're like, can you give us, you get a notification to be like, will you give us access to your microphone or phone? And you might think of it like, oh, it's just so that when I talk into it or when I want to post a picture, like, it'll have, they'll have access to my camera roll, but people aren't really thinking like, oh, they're going to have access to all my pictures or just stuff beyond the surface level of the initial notification that they get.
Yeah. Something about that though is that there are some apps where it gives you the option to like only allow certain photos, which it gets like, I've done that before and it honestly gets annoying. And then I just kind of give in. I'm like, fine, you can have access to all my photos. And then it's like this trap of like, oh yeah, we gave you the option to only have access to this photo this one time or this camera this one time, but you decided to go in and change your settings. And I've been seeing that a lot more. I see it a lot, especially with WhatsApp, which I feel like is a really big like messaging app, but they give you the option like, oh, I can only access the camera once, I can only access this photos once, but it just gets annoying. And then you just give them access to everything. And then I don't know what WhatsApp does with my mic and my camera and my photos. I don't know what all these like social media sites do, but it's forcing your hand. Like you're like, okay, well, I don't want to have to go in every time I want to send a photo and select that exact photo. It's annoying. It's easier to just let you have all my stuff.
For honestly, privacy on Facebook is a shambles. I remember when we watched the documentary about Facebook. I remember there was this European person, and he shed light on how, despite him deleting his Facebook chats, Facebook still had every single one of his chats like throughout the years. And I thought that's crazy. If I delete my chat, I don't want anyone to see it anymore. I want it gone from the face of the earth. But Facebook keeps everything. They keep track of everything, and I don't know how I feel about that. I don't like it. I like my privacy. I like if I delete something, it's my consent. I'm deleting it. I don't want it to be there anymore. But Facebook keeps it, and I don't like it. I think we talked a good amount about Facebook and its privacy. I just have another question for you guys. So what do you guys think of the lack of social media control, and how organizations such as ISIS and terrorist organizations such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda utilize platforms such as Facebook to spread their propaganda? Do you guys think that Facebook should be held responsible or not? And do you think the section 230 should be changed? In case you guys forgot, Section 230 is basically a law that that says that platforms such as Facebook are not responsible for what third parties post on there. So ISIS is not, basically Facebook is not responsible for terrorist organizations such as ISIS posting on their platform. So yeah, what do you guys think of that?
I really don't think it should be, I don't think they should be like held accountable, but I do feel like they should put a limit to certain things that are advertised or posted on their platform. Yes, because some things advertise as like violence or whatever the case may be. So I don't think that it's a free world. I don't think that they should like ban it, but they should also like control the algorithm of what's being posted and what's being uploaded and advertised on their platform. Yes, I do.
Yeah, they should be aware of what's going on. Obviously, you can't blame like Facebook for everything that goes on their website, all the bad stuff, but they should be aware. And if they're not aware, then I feel like that's a problem with how their company is run, like how that business is run, and that where do you draw the line of where you can like hold Facebook accountable, where you can't hold Facebook accountable. It's just it's hard. It's a blurred line. It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
Honestly, I disagree. I feel like Facebook should be held accountable for every post, for example, by a terrorist organization. You know, Facebook has billions of dollars. The least they could do is just invest some of that money into to making sure hate programs such as those are not prevalent. You know, even because they have a severe impact on society. For example, I know we read in, I think, the Like War book that Russia played a huge role in the 2016 elections in electing Donald Trump. And I feel like if on Facebook someone's exploiting the platform to that extent, Facebook should be held responsible, you know, because a president was elected, and in those 4 years, a lot of change was made, and Facebook played a huge role in that.
Yeah, I agree with that, because going back to how their algorithms work, of how when you interact with certain posts and you interact just with certain content on the platforms, that's what you're gonna see. And when you go on the app, the first things that you're going to see are going to be the things that you most commonly interact with. So if you're a part of a hate group, or you're part of a terrorist group, and you're allowing these companies, or not, I'm sorry, not these companies, these groups to willingly post on these platforms and people interact with them, you're just fueling you're building an online community of hate, because once you go, then there's just going to be more interactions that build up. And when you go on the app, you know, people that are in these communities are just going to grow because they're retweeting it or they're resharing it or whatever. And that plays again into the consequences of the algorithms that these social media platforms have really put in place in social media today. So that's just another like very negative outcome that targeted ads and just targeted, or what do you call it, personalized feeds have kind of come to.
Which I understand what both of you are saying, but I kind of disagree in a sense, because now, ever since the breach happened with Facebook, now people are being like shadow banned or blocked from commenting certain things. Let's say if someone posts like a racist comment, that person comment will get deleted, or their account might get blocked because of hate speech, or it goes against the community rules. So I feel like there are things that have been put in place or that are in the works of being put in place, so that those type of groups, hate groups, are not like, they're not furthering their mission to get more people to join their groups. I feel like, because a lot of these groups are being taken down and they're being banned from social platforms altogether. So I don't feel like Facebook isn't doing its job to make sure like these type of things are happening. But two, they are taking like some protocols and some measures, but like I said, they can't control. In hindsight, they can't control what people post, but in a sense, they can't control what everyone posts as well. So it's like a 50, like Grace said, it's like a blurred line type of thing when it comes to that.
Yeah,
lot
and
of
I
people-
also think
I'm sorry,
that oh sorry, yeah. I also think that issue like of Facebook and other social media platforms being held accountable for things posted on there kind of clashes a little bit with the privacy concerns issue, just because like one of the ways that you can limit that is by like having people give more information like when they're signing up and on their profiles and stuff to verify them. Like that's like big thing on a lot of social media networks is people being verified to make sure that they're not like fake accounts or whatever. And I think that that's kind of like clashing with the whole Section 230 issue, because it's forcing people to disclose more information in order to like kind of keep the brand image, I guess, of the like social media networks, like for things that are posted on their sites. Obviously, if they're not like regulated, it's important for like the source of the post to be verified at least.
Yeah, I think another issue, I mean, there's a lot of clashes and just issues in general with this topic, but the topic of our First Amendment rights play a big part in it too. So a lot of people, again, I wouldn't say I'm directly, like I agree with both points that have been made, like of whether, or the fact that there have been guidelines to kind of control somewhat of what's being posted and taking down things such as hate speech and stuff like that. But then I also think that Facebook isn't held as accountable as they should be, and they're almost held too much, or they're almost protected too much. But the question is, when it comes to freedom of speech and the First Amendment, like that is a good argument of whether or not they're allowed to take down posts and the power that they have, even though it is their platform. Is it a platform that you can, speak freely on according to their terms or whatever, which also falls into the concept of gatekeeping. So what are your guys' thoughts kind of on that, of, I guess, the
So
First Amendment and freedom of speech with all of this?
the thing is, the First Amendment, so if Facebook was solely in the US, I would agree. People should be able to post whatever they want. However, there are way more international users of Facebook than in the United States, and the First Amendment is not applicable, obviously, for countries in the Middle East, or honestly almost everywhere in the world other than like Western Europe and Europe. So yeah, I feel like talking about the First Amendment, it's kind of a little bit like irrelevant to a sense for Facebook. I just think that it's just so easy to go on like an ISIS group chat on Facebook, like for real. You guys in less than an hour can easily find like a group chat for ISIS to go join and explore their propaganda. I don't think it should be that easy. I think Facebook should do a better job in keeping those type of groups away from any human as far away as possible. And not just because of that, because like you said, I forgot who mentioned it, but our grandparents, right? Our grandparents are not the best with technology. They believe everything. They tend to believe everything they see, especially on platforms such as Facebook. I've heard a dozen times my mom come up to me and tell me, "Oh, for COVID, rub this on you and you'll be fine," or whatever. And I feel like Facebook played a huge role in also COVID cases. People were just spreading false information everywhere, and I feel like Facebook should be held more accountable to it. I feel like Facebook's priority shouldn't be on profits. It should be on making sure false information is not spread. Sorry, that was a lot.
That was
That was
good.
good.
Anybody else have anything about that topic of freedom of speech. That was a good point, though. Great point, actually, of where it is kind of it's very irrelevant to other countries because they're not obviously following, our amendments or anything. So, anyone else want to chime in, or is that good for that
I
discussion?
don't really have anything. I
I
mean,
think we're good. I think
He went in depth on it.
we
Yeah,
spoke
no,
for like
thank
40
you.
minutes. So
That's a good point.
anybody have any final points, just like that they wanted to touch on, they didn't get to?
I think I'm all set.
Everybody's all set?
I
Awesome.
think actually, I have a quick little. I'll see if I could share my screen real quick.
Okay. All right. You have a
Hold on
histogram.
just a second. I
Yeah,
actually
you
don't
should be
think,
able to, I think.
I don't think I'm going to use the histogram, but there's at least a little image,
Visual.
a visual. Thank you. Let me see. Hold on. At least can you guys see it?
yes.
Yeah.
So obviously we talked about a lot of the problems and stuff like that. And then obviously, I guess these are some actions or courses of action that you can take to help protect privacy. And these are kind of basic, but I just thought this was a helpful graphic that
No, it's cool.
would be helpful. So obviously reduce personal sharing, and then just stuff like we touched on, reading privacy terms and conditions, and then yeah, just in general, just I think education, just being educated in general, and practicing good information literacy skills of just, you have to know that you are going to be a target of manipulation on any platform that you really go to, because there's just so much information. But you have to know and take responsibility of realizing that not everything you see on there is true. You have to do appropriate lateral reading and verification of research. And just, I think in general, if everyone kind of did their part, I mean, it's easier said than done, but if people did their part in educating themselves and just, like I said, being more literate when it comes to knowing what information is trying to get you to buy something, or fake news, or just in general try to manipulate you, would be helpful in general. So, and then this is just a good little visual.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like a good point to end on, is just that in general, social media is always going to be trying to manipulate you to get you to share some private information that you don't want to share in a way that you don't think that you're sharing it. And so it's just important. It's always evolving as people, continue to preach these things that we're showing, and maybe people are starting to read terms and conditions. So social media is just going to keep evolving and keep coming up with ways to take information. So it's just important to be aware of that. And as kind of technology continues to change, those methods are going to change. So it's just important to kind of, be aware.
Sir.
Yeah. Awesome.